Let's talk about the SEC and the Big Ten as this debate rages on, not just about the postseason, but about the regular season schedules. And the fact that we know that both the SEC and Greg Sankey and Tony Petitti in the Big Ten want to go to the automatic bids so that they can have their conference play-in tournament and bring that big new revenue stream that did not currently exist. When you get one out of thin air, man, that's a beauty in business. So they absolutely want that thing. Now, recently, someone in the Big Ten took a shot this week that the Big Ten is going to go ahead and be supportive of the 5-11, which is 4 conference champions, 1 G5, and 11 at-large bids, if the SEC takes on that 9th conference game. Of course, the SEC plays 8 conference games, as does the ACC. The Big Ten plays 9. But the SEC said that they would take that on if they get the automatic bids, so the 4-4. The Big Ten saying that they would support the 5-11 is total nonsense. I mean, sure, they can say that, but all they're doing is posturing. They are sending a shot across the bow saying, pick up the 9th game and making themselves look a little better. But the truth is, this whole 4-4 thing is Tony Petitti's idea. He's the one pushing it. The Big Ten and the SEC both want it. The SEC said they'd pick up the 9th game if they go to the automatic qualifiers, and the Big Ten and the SEC hold all the power to do this. There's not a debate. There's not an argument. The only thing the Big Ten and the SEC are doing right now is trying to be nice and trying to get them to see it their way. And by them, I mean all the other conference commissioners. But the truth is, in the end, they're going to do exactly what they want to do. And they've already told us what they want to do. That's the 4-4, 2-2-3, a 16-team playoff, 4 conference bids automatically to the Big Ten, to the SEC, 2 to the ACC, 2 to the Big 12, 1 for a group of 5, and 3 at large. I, for one, am happy about this. I think that, obviously, I'd be happy with just a 16 at large, but I'm happy about this because I know they were going to go to the automatic bids as soon as they started bringing it up. And we saw that conference championship playoff structure because they stand to gain so much more money from it. But I didn't want 14. I wanted 16 to have those 3 at-large bids to save out a conference. Now, I did want to get in a little bit to this 8-game, 9-game SEC Big Ten schedule. Greg Sankey's last day at SEC meetings, he decides to release a pamphlet of paperwork to the media in attendance. And basically, it's letting them know about the rigors of the SEC schedule. And I thought this was so corny of him. He talked all week at SEC meetings about just how difficult their schedule was. And on and on and on he went. And he pretended as if the SEC doesn't get that extra loss to play with, which we know they do. We're talking about a 10-2 Tennessee team was above an 11-1 Indiana team in the end. They get that benefit of the doubt. They get that extra loss. They always have. We'll see if they continue to moving forward, even though the gap continues to close between the Big Ten and the SEC. And we're going to talk about that in a bit. But they bring out this paperwork, a regular season gauntlet. When looking at the leading metrics and factoring in the strength of schedule, the conclusion across all of them is clear. No other conference has a regular season as grueling as the SEC. And they handed all this out to the media members as if they're trying to sell them. They don't need sold. They're not making any decision. They just want them to spread this propaganda. Now, there's only one other conference that they could be, have that title of the most grueling conference schedule, and that's the Big Ten. So they're kind of sending another shot across the bow here. The Big Ten kind of took one at them with the 9 games, and they would support the 5-11 if the SEC added the 9th game. So, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. But it is clear that the SEC believes that their 8-game conference schedule is tougher than the Big Ten's 9-game conference schedule. The question is, are they right? Bill Connolly, S&P Plus, certainly not an SEC honk. He has Ohio State number 1 in his S&P Plus, recently released his 40 top schedules. And the strength of scheduling rating is projected. It's a win percentage, that an average top 5 team would be expected to have against your schedule. So let's say, for instance, he is reviewing Oklahoma's schedule. How would a top 5 team perform against each game here? And that's how he does it. And he ranked the top 40 schedules. So obviously there's a flaw here. And the flaw is we don't know how good those teams are going to be that everybody's playing, right? Because we don't know how good anybody is yet. So when you do these things at the beginning of the season, generally what we've seen is overvaluing of the SEC competition before the season even starts. You see it in the rankings, you see it in the rankings of schedules, and they put this stuff out, and then it becomes this never-ending self-fulfilling prophecy. Whether the SEC is having an up year or a down year, it's pretty much the same every year, and that is, you beat this team, well, that team was ranked, you must be great. You lost to this team, well, that team was ranked, so we're just going to drop you a little bit because you lost to a really good team. And it has artificially propped up a lot of SEC teams many, many years. Not always, sometimes they've deserved it, but the process has definitely unfairly helped the SEC much more than the Big Ten. I can say that as an honest college football fan. I don't have a dog in the fight. I'm not a Big Ten fan or an SEC fan. I just observe and call it like I see it, and it has certainly helped the SEC. There are a lot of fans of Big Ten teams that just get absolutely furious about this, and I believe that they deserve to be mad about it. The other thing that has angered Big Ten fans is they don't adjust these strength of schedule metrics as the season goes on. You will still see midway through the season, people cite Bill Connolly's pre-season schedule rankings as to how tough people's schedules are. Well, we now have data. We're halfway through the season, and they're still citing what he said before the season started. Even if a team that was in the top 10, well, 3 of the teams that were expected to be very difficult, let's say they're not so good this year. Well, that has significantly changed how difficult their schedule is, no? Well, they'll still cite it. And by they, I mean, talking heads, pretty much everybody. And that's always bothered Big Ten fans, and it should. If you start with the premise that more SEC teams are better than anybody else, then you will continue to reinforce that result all the way through the season. So what happens when we get to the end? What happens when we get to the end and they all lose? Do we adjust the next year? Do we adjust after 2 years of seeing that? When is it that we start to see this change? Sometimes we never know in the postseason. There's been years when we've had bowl games between the SEC and the Big Ten, and we have a lot every year. But there have been years in the postseason where we've seen nothing but a bunch of garbage games where there are people sitting, people getting, not playing on either side. And even in those years, you would see a lot of SEC fans, and the majority of the time they would win. And the majority of the time, which also was 100% true, the Big Ten was playing up because of the Rose Bowl tie-in. They were playing the 4th-ranked Big Ten team would be playing the 3rd-ranked SEC team, and on down the line. They'd be playing up 1 seed. And this contributed to a lot of times the SEC winning those bowl games. But for the most part, there were a lot of them that didn't matter from a real honest fan's perspective because guys were sitting out. Then you roll into last year, you had a couple of really consequential bowl games that absolutely did matter. Guys weren't sitting out for that Michigan and Alabama game, except for on the Michigan side. Illinois, South Carolina, that was a full-on game that both wanted to win. Nobody was sitting. And the Big Ten won both those games. Obviously, you had what Ohio State did. The year prior, you had Washington beating Texas. Obviously, that's, they weren't in the conferences yet, but they are now. And you had Michigan winning the national championship, beating Alabama that year as well. There's certainly a lot of data that shows, without a doubt, at the top of the conferences, the Big Ten is now better now. I guess what we want to know is how much down the line does that go? Now, I looked at I looked at some odds today, and I was really surprised. So, looking at the odds to win the national championship, going down, you get down to the 10th SEC team, 10 SEC teams before you hit the 5th Big Ten team. And that really surprised me. The Big Ten teams, obviously, we know the three big dogs. Number 4 is Michigan. They have the 13th best odds to win the national championship. Then you get all the way down to 21 to USC. And at 21 at USC, that's the 5th Big Ten team. There are already 10 SEC teams above them. So from Vegas's perspective as well, that's still a pretty sizable gap. I want to go over these schedule rankings that what Connolly put out there so you can see this. This is something, man. So he's got number 1 Florida, number 1 Oklahoma, number 2 Florida, number 3 Arkansas, number 4 Wisconsin. Badgers got a rough one. Number 5 Vanderbilt, number 6 Mississippi State, number 7 South Carolina, number 8 Kentucky, number 9 LSU, number 10 Texas, number 11 Alabama, number 12 Texas A&M, number 13 Georgia, number 14 Syracuse, number 15 Auburn. That is 13 out of the top 15 most difficult schedules are in the SEC. One Big Ten team, and that's Wisconsin, and probably only because they go and play an SEC team. That is pretty wild to me. The funny thing is you go to the next 15 and you pretty much got all the Big Ten teams right here with 16 Rutgers, 17 Purdue, 18 Northwestern, 19 UCLA, 20 USC, 21 Ohio State, 23 Ole Miss, 24 Tennessee, 25 Mizzou, 26 Michigan State, 27 Minnesota, 28 Washington, 29 Penn State, and 30 Florida State. But according to Bill Connolly, the entire SEC, despite playing that one less conference game, is a more difficult schedule in 2025 than the entire Big Ten. I also wanted to check a couple other sources. So I went to Power Ratings Guru, and they have Wisconsin, South Carolina, Arkansas, Florida, Mississippi, Kentucky, Oklahoma, Syracuse, TCU, Alabama, Georgia, Vanderbilt, UCLA. So a little more balance. You've got 10 SEC teams in the top 15. How about Sports Illustrated top 10? Oklahoma, Florida, Arkansas, Wisconsin, Vanderbilt, Mississippi State, South Carolina, Kentucky, LSU, Texas A&M, 90% SEC in their top 10. So we get the point. It's pretty clear that everybody doing these metrics is saying that the SEC has the toughest schedules despite playing that one less game. Now, when we're looking at someone's schedule, I don't know how you judge it, but if you're like me, you go through and you look at the opponents and you look, okay, this opponent is that's a contender, man. That's a big time opponent, right? That's a tough game. This is, this one's a pretty good team. This might be a tough out, and this is a total cream puff. Usually like 4 tiers in my brain. There's no system, but that's kind of how I go through it real quick. But I wanted to actually put these things in this system that I make in my head when I go through it. Actually put it on paper. What does it look like side by side, the Big Ten and the SEC? So I did that, and I did that with the Las Vegas odds. And I put it into 4 categories. We've got championship contenders, playoff contending teams, teams that are potentially a tough out, teams that maybe they pop up and give somebody a hell of a game like Wisconsin gave Oregon last year, et cetera. And then you got teams that are cellar dwellers, teams that are plus 20,000 to win the conference. So let's take a look at what that looks like side by side, Big Ten and SEC. All right, so let's take a look at our championship contenders at the top here. Out of the SEC, we've got Texas, Georgia, Alabama, and LSU. Out of the Big Ten, we've got Ohio State, Oregon, and Penn State. Now, the odds-on favorites to win the national championship, we've got almost a 3-way tie. We've now got Texas and Ohio State at a deadlock at plus 600, Georgia at plus 650. That's essentially a 3-way tie. Penn State has dropped back a little bit. Then you've got, after that, Oregon, and then a big drop to Alabama. So we've got 3 Big Ten teams in that top 5. And if I'm betting, I'm taking my top 2 Big Ten teams against those top 2 SEC teams. The point is, when we're looking at these teams at the top here, seeing 3 teams on the side of the Big Ten that, looking to the left over there at the SEC and feeling confident about those Big Ten teams winning those head-to-head battles, something we're not used to. We're not used to looking at 3 Big Ten teams at the top and 3 SEC teams and thinking the Big Ten teams could definitely, not only could they win, but you'd pick more than 2 of them to win, or more than 1 of them to win. And that's how I'm seeing that right now. So this is something different. This is something new. It's kind of exciting. I like it. Playoff contenders. I think the way I hear people talking about Indiana recently, this is going to be kind of surprising to people, that Indiana, 35th best odds to win the national championship and just the 9th best odds to win the conference. I've seen them ranked really high on some people's top 25s. Vegas not seeing it that way. But when we're matching these teams up, let's go SEC versus Big Ten. Like, how you feeling about Ole Miss versus Michigan? I think Ole Miss might be a little bit of a favorite, but it's a tight game. Texas A&M versus USC. USC, I believe, would be a favorite right there. Auburn versus Illinois. I think Illinois would be favored in that. Florida versus Iowa. I think Florida would be a big favorite in that. Tennessee versus Nebraska. I think Tennessee would be a little bit of a favorite. South Carolina versus Indiana. That's a tough one. But again, we're talking about, we are now 10 teams down with the Big Ten and the SEC, and we're having toss-up games. And 5 years ago, this would be a depressing exercise for a Big Ten fan to match up 10 teams down and look at these teams side by side. Even still, there's a ton of room to grow, because when we look at these teams, guys, when we look at Ole Miss, let's just do this. All right, Ole Miss, not so much Ole Miss. Let's go Texas A&M, Auburn, Florida, Tennessee, Oklahoma. That's 5 teams on the left in that playoff contender group that recruit consistently in the top 15. And when you go look at the guys on the right, you've only got Michigan and USC that compete in that territory on the recruiting trail. And the rest of them, we're talking in the 30s and lower sometimes. I was like 50 last year. So the Big Ten been able to make this up without a big boost in recruiting. And it's only going to continue to improve. Let's go to our next page. And because the SEC has fewer teams, it looks a little wonky here, but this is my potential tough out candidates here. So these are teams that are kind of that next tier below. They can jump up and get you once in a blue moon. Odds of plus 5,000 to plus 13,000. And there's a couple of Big Ten teams here that can absolutely beat you, man. Washington's a tough team. Minnesota had a good year. Wisconsin, Michigan State. These are schools that are investing in football. They want to get better. They got good coaches. They're paying for assistant coaching staffs, which is what Big Ten programs were not doing in the past. It's why Brett Bielema left the Big Ten and went to Arkansas. And then we go down to the plus 20,000. So these are, the dogs of the conferences. These are the gimme wins. You better not lose to these guys: Kentucky, Mississippi State, Vandy, and UCLA, Rutgers, Maryland, Purdue, Northwestern. Then we go to coaches, just kind of rolling through that coaches list. In the front there, you got Dan Lanning and Kalen DeBoer. Pretty similar, right? I think that Brian Kelly and James Franklin are pretty similar. And we talk about career achievements. Ryan Day and Kirby Smart, pretty similar, which is pretty interesting up at the top of those conferences. Sark, he's a one man on his own. I don't know who to compare him with. But on down the line there, we look at this pile of coaches, the Big Ten coaches, I mean, there's some studs, man. You got Lincoln Riley, you got Brett Bielema, Kirk Ferentz, Matt Rule, Kurt Signetti. On the other side, we're looking at Lane Kiffin, Mike Elko, Hugh Freeze, Billy Napier, Josh Heupel, Shane Beamer, Brent Venables. I mean, the Big Ten has come up in the game of coaching. Like, it's really, really a big surge. It's a whole lot different. And I think that there's a lot of SEC fans who are notorious for the conference pride thing. They're having a hard time accepting this and thinking this is just kind of a one-off. And it's really not. This is really a trend that's not going to stop. And I think the reason is that same reason I talked about Ohio State getting these guys from Mississippi, from Louisiana, guys that normally would not have left their footprint. They didn't leave for the biggest offer, but 5 years ago, they never would have done that. The seal has been broken. And just the same way as I used to talk about for these guys from Ohio, the world has shrunk, and they have seen guys drop in their top 10 and, okay, this is what we're supposed to do, man. I want to do that when I get bigger. I want to drop my top 10. I want to go on official visits all over the country. And we're starting to see a lot more of these Southern kids realize, oh, I can go be a star up there, make as much money, and they love football too, and they'll love me. And there's plenty of guys who want to do that. And it's spreading, and it's growing, and it's becoming bigger. And it's going to start trickling out to programs that aren't Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan. And the transfer portal obviously assists that a ton. But this gap will continue to close, even if they find a way to rein in pay for play. It'll continue to close. So making any kind of concrete agreement, or for the SEC to try to dig their heels in on the 8-game schedule right now, because of their conference schedule being so tough right now, I'm sure their metrics show the gap has been closing, and it'll continue to. So it's really kind of disingenuous on Sankey's part to try to pull that nonsense. At any rate, why don't we look at a couple of these schedules? So why don't we take a look at a couple of these schedules head to head? Let's look at the number 8 ranked schedule for both the SEC and the Big Ten, and that's LSU, Ohio State. Right up at the top, we're looking at a wash, all right? Let's just say Clemson and Texas wash each other off. All right, get them out of there. Then we've got, obviously on LSU's schedule, there are 3 cream puffs. Ohio State has 2 cream puffs. As far as tiers, championship caliber programs, Ohio State has Penn State on the schedule. LSU has Alabama. Playoff contenders, LSU has Florida, Ole Miss, South Carolina, Texas A&M, and Oklahoma. Ohio State, Illinois, Michigan. So considerably harder when we talk about, how many more difficult teams. Or when I look at this, it's more skewed for me in my head towards difficult teams or opportunities to actually lose a game. And in this particular schedule, despite Ohio State having to play one extra conference game, LSU has more opportunities where, they're risking a loss in that schedule. So moving on down, the Buckeyes with a couple of guys in that lower tier. They got Purdue, UCLA, Rutgers, all would be in that bottom tier of the Big Ten. And LSU has Vanderbilt, who would be in the bottom tier of the SEC. So all in all, I do think LSU plays a tougher schedule in 2025 than Ohio State, but both really tough schedules. Over here, this is, I believe these are the number 2. So we got the second-ranked SEC schedule, the second-ranked Big Ten schedule, Mississippi State versus UCLA. Both of these guys also play a big out-of-conference game, with Mississippi State playing Arizona State, UCLA playing Utah, so good on them. Then we've got a couple of cream puffs for Mississippi State and Southern Mississippi, Alcorn State, Northern Illinois. UCLA has UNLV in New Mexico. So Mississippi State gets one extra cream puff. All right, how many championship contenders do they play? Mississippi State plays Texas and Georgia, 2 championship contenders. How about UCLA? They've got Penn State and Ohio State. So 2-2 for the championship contenders. How about the playoff contenders? Mississippi State has Tennessee, Texas A&M, Florida, and Ole Miss. 4 playoff contenders. UCLA has Indiana, Nebraska, USC, 3 playoff contenders. And that next tier, UCLA has Washington, Mississippi State has Arkansas. And finally, the cellar dwellers. Mississippi State does not have any cellar dwellers. UCLA has Michigan State and Maryland. So all in all, even with one less game in conference, I think that's a pretty balanced. I don't know who I'd pick if I had to pick one to play. They're pretty even Steven to me. All right, Georgia, Penn State. These two are like, I don't know, 10th rated conference schedules per the Connolly rankings. Georgia, championship caliber teams they've got on their schedule: Alabama and Texas. Penn State has Oregon and Ohio State, so they're both playing one championship contender. Playoff contenders: Georgia has Tennessee, Auburn, Ole Miss, Florida. That's 4. Penn State has Iowa, Indiana, Nebraska. That's 3. Next tier down, Georgia doesn't have any. Penn State has Michigan State, and Penn State has a couple of cellar dwellers in UCLA, Northwestern, and Rutgers, 3 of them. Georgia has Mississippi State, and of course, all right, so just their conference schedule, I think it's tougher even with one less game. Georgia's is to me. The fact that they got Georgia Tech on top of it, yeah, I definitely think that's tougher as well. All right, the Gators and Rutgers. The Gators got to play LSU, Texas, and Georgia, 3 championship contenders. Rutgers has to play Oregon, Ohio State, and Penn State. So, wow, 3 championship contenders apiece. How about playoff contenders? Florida has Texas A&M, Ole Miss, and Tennessee. Rutgers has Iowa, Illinois, and that's it. All right, tough outs. No tough outs for Florida. Tough outs for Rutgers. These are some bangers right here, guys. These are some awesome schedules. As to whose is harder, I mean, they look pretty doggone even to me. And in conference, and when you add in Miami and Florida State, that Gator schedule is ridiculous. So I think the point is, based off what I'm seeing, despite having that extra conference game, these schedules look pretty even to me. And I understand you are talking about an extra game of wear and tear. I judge a schedule based on how many big games, how many difficult games, how many potential losses can you take in a schedule? And even with that extra conference game, because the Big Ten has more of the guys at the bottom, you know, you got more of this tier, which I think will continue to get better. But as of yet, it's still got a ways to go to come up and become a little bit more competitive in the league. But because of that, you have more teams and you have more of those cream puffy teams that kind of water down that schedule. Now, it certainly is a more physically grinding game to play one of them than an FCS team. And certainly one of them is going to pop up and beat you once in a while. But when we look at those schedules side by side, they feel pretty similar to me, despite that one separate game. I don't think it's going to last, though. I think it'll continue to trend to the Big Ten. I appreciate you so much, and I'll talk to you soon. Chuck and Bucks out.